Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're doing exactly what we do best, taking a stack of sources, in this case top headlines from India today, for May 26, 2025, and really digging in.
That's the plan.
Our goal is to get past just reading the titles, to unpack the most important bits, find those surprising details, and figure out what it all actually means. We've got our expert guide here to help connect the dots for you.
Exactly. Think of it as your quick way to get properly informed on the key stories happening right now in India. We're talking sports, politics, the economy, international relations, the works.
We'll pull out the essential insights from these headlines, give you the core information quickly, clearly.
Let's get started then.
All right, let's dive straight in. Our first headline takes us to cricket and the tail end of the IPL season. Sunrisers Hyderabad. They finished their campaign with a pretty remarkable individual performance.
Oh, they certainly did, yeah. Even though their season was, wrapping up that final match against Kolkata Knight Riders, it saw something really special from Heinrich Klaasen.
And the numbers, well, they speak for themselves, don't they? He hit an unbeaten 105 runs off just 39 balls.
39 balls, it's staggering.
For a century. In any format, really, but especially IPL.
And that knock helped SRH post a massive 278 for 3. The source confirms that's actually the third highest total ever recorded in the IPL.
Wow. Okay. And that match was in Delhi.
That's right, in Delhi. And, speaking of speed, that century wasn't just fast. It was historically fast. It's listed as the joint third fastest century in the entire history of the IPL.
Incredible. So how did the innings break down? Must have been just relentless hitting.
Pretty much. He got to his first 50 in, 17 balls, blistering pace.
13.
Yeah, and then the next 50 runs came in only 20 more deliveries, just kept accelerating. He hit 7 boundaries and 9 sixes, 9.
Goodness. What's interesting, too, is Klaasen's own take on it, mentioned in the source. He sounded quite grateful, didn't he? The family to SRH.
He did. He acknowledged the franchise's support and admitted it had been, in his words, an underwhelming season for him personally before that knock. He clearly felt, he needed to deliver something big.
And he calls himself a big situation player. Sounds like he thrives under pressure.
That's the impression, yeah. Willing to adapt his role, bat wherever needed for the team.
And you have to think, that opening partnership, Travis Head and Abhishek Sharma putting on 92, that must set things up perfectly for him.
Oh, absolutely. Gave him that platform to just come in and explode. His dominance was so total that KKR spinners, Nareen and Chakravarthi, who are usually pretty effective.
Usually very tricky.
Yeah, they reportedly really struggled against him.
And KKR's chase. It didn't go well either, did it?
Not at all. Nareen gave them a decent start with the bat, but the rest just couldn't keep up. SRH's bowlers were on point.
Who were the key wicket takers for SRH?
Well, Jaidev Unadkat took 3 for 24, Harsh Dubey got 3 for 34, and Ishan Malinga chipped in with 3 for 31. Pretty comprehensive.
So they bowled KKR out for 168 and under 19 overs?
Yep, 18.4 overs, which meant KKR finished their season down in 8th place.
And Klaasen apparently mentioned working on his game, shot selection, after some struggles.
That's right, said he'd been working on things. So look, SRH didn't make the playoffs, but this was certainly a stunning way for them, and for him, to finish the campaign.
Definitely a high note to end on. Okay, let's shift from the cricket pitch to the world stage. A significant diplomatic development between India and Canada. Looks like a key conversation happened after that period of, noticeable strain.
Yes, that's right. A really important first official conversation happened on May 25th. It was between India's External Affairs Minister, S. Jaishankar, and Canada's new Foreign Minister, Anita Anand.
And the stated goals were pretty clear, weren't they? Strengthen ties, boost economic cooperation.
Advance shared priorities, yeah. Standard diplomatic aims, but the context here is crucial.
Right, the timing. This happened after Prime Minister Mark Carney's election win in Canada and his new government taking charge. The source material suggests this offers a fresh opportunity, doesn't it?
Exactly, a chance to reset relations, especially after the really difficult period under the previous PM, Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, maybe we should quickly recap that strain, just for context. It really flared up in September 2023.
It did. That's when Trudeau made that public accusation alleging Indian agents were involved in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Which India immediately rejected, calling the allegations absurd.
Vehemently denied them, yeah.
Yeah.
And that led to a real downward spiral. Canada linked some Indian diplomats to the case.
And India retaliated, withdrew its high commissioner, expelled Canadian diplomats. It got quite serious.
It really did. A proper diplomatic freeze for several months. But interestingly, the source mentions that even during that low point, security officials kept talking behind the scenes.
Okay.
And discussions had apparently started quietly about appointing new high commissioners, so maybe not a total freeze at all levels.
And India had also been critical of Trudeau, right? About pro-Khalistani groups operating in Canada.
Yes, that was a recurring point of friction. India felt the Trudeau government wasn't doing enough to curb activities of certain factions there.
So with Trudeau gone, there's optimism. The source says New Delhi sees potential now to rebuild things.
That's the sense, yes. Rebuild based on mutual trust and sensitivity is the phrase used. Trudeau's departure seems key to that renewed optimism.
So this conversation between Jaishankar and Anand, they exchanged best wishes, called it productive on social media. It really sounds like a deliberate signal, doesn't it?
It absolutely feels like a signal, a potential thaw, a sort of first critical step towards getting things back on track diplomatically.
And looking bigger picture, maybe the global situation right now actually helps, provides space for them to find common ground again.
Could be, especially in areas like trade and security where cooperation makes sense for both. The hope, clearly, is to move past the recent discord and build something more stable for the future.
Okay, let's turn to another diplomatic front. India and Guyana. Seems like there's been engagement there, focusing on security, but also economic ties.
That's right. An interesting meeting happened. A delegation of Indian MPs, including well-known names like Shashi Tharoor and Tejasvi Surya, met with Guyana's Vice President, Bharat Jagdeo.
And security was a big part of the conversation, specifically terrorism.
Exactly. India's zero-tolerance stance on terrorism was highlighted, particularly its fight against Pakistan-sponsored terrorism.
And how did Guyana respond?
Vice President Jagdeo apparently strongly condemned a recent terror attack in Pahalgam and voiced support for India's Operation Sindoor. He stressed the need for global unity against state-sponsored violence, so clear alignment there.
And the Indian side, Tharoor and Surya, they emphasized India's long fight against cross-border terror.
Yes, described it as a long-standing battle and really pushed the importance of international collaboration on counterterrorism.
But it wasn't just security, right? Economics came up too.
Definitely. Infrastructure, energy, fintech, agriculture, all mentioned as areas for potential cooperation.
And Guyana's becoming quite an economic player, isn't it? Because of oil.
That's the key driver. The source points to its rapid economic growth, fueled by these massive new oil discoveries. And that's creating, as the source puts it, immense opportunities for Indian businesses.
So Jagdeo was interested in deepening those ties.
Apparently very much so. Tejasvi Surya noted Jagdeo showed keen interest in boosting trade and development partnerships with India.
Surya also spoke to students there at Taxila American University.
He did. Reinforce India's counterterrorism commitment under PM Modi talked about global peace. And that university has its own India connection. Indian students and faculty have been there since 2010.
So this delegation, it wasn't just one party, it was cross-party.
Yeah, led by Tharoor, but included MPs from across the political spectrum. The source frames it as part of a broader Indian initiative bolstering global anti-terror efforts and building alliances more generally.
So overall, this meeting looks like a significant step in India's strategy.
Seems that way. Reinforcing security commitments while simultaneously expanding economic links with a strategically important and growing partner like Guyana, highlighting those mutual interests to pave the way for, deeper engagement down the line.
Okay, shifting gears dramatically now from diplomacy to the economy on a really big scale. Huge news here.
Just as a major headline, India has officially overtaken Japan to become the world's fourth largest economy.
Wow, that's a milestone many have been watching for. Is it confirmed?
It is confirmed. The source material cites NDIO CEO BVR Subramaniam confirming it. The projected GDP for the financial year 2025-26 is pegged at $4.19 trillion.
$4.19 trillion.
Right.
Okay, and that officially puts India ahead of Japan. Big moment. How was the reaction? Anand Mahindra weighed in.
He did. He called it a dream come true, which is quite something. But importantly, he also urged people not to stop there, to keep the ambition high.
And his focus for what's next was per capita income, right?
Exactly. That's the crucial measure of sort of individual prosperity. The source says it's expected to hit $2,880 in 2025, which, is double what it was a decade ago.
So progress, but still a way to go compared to developed nations.
Definitely. But the trajectory is what's significant. And this overall economic growth, it's attributed to sustained reforms. The sources mention governance, infrastructure, manufacturing, education, access to capital, a whole range of areas.
What are the projections looking like going forward? The IMF expects strong growth.
They do. The IMF predicts 6.2% growth for India in 2025-26. That's still very strong globally, though maybe a touch lower than some earlier estimates, reportedly due to global trade tensions putting a bit of a damper on things.
And just to place this achievement, fourth largest is huge, but who are the top three?
Still the U.S. way out in front at $30.5 trillion, then China at $19.2 trillion, and Germany. So India's still got climbing to do.
But the Niti Aayog CEO, Subramaniam, he sounded confident about climbing further.
He did express confidence that if the current policies continue, India could potentially overtake Germany and move into third place within, say, 2.5 to 3 years.
That would be another massive step.
It really reflects the ambition and the sheer hard work of millions across India. Challenges definitely remain, particularly around equitable growth, but the overall direction seems pretty clear. Powerful growth.
And that economic momentum ties neatly into our next headline, actually. It's about global manufacturing strategy, and specifically Apple's focus on India.
Right. And the Niti Aayog CEO, BVR Subramaniam, he weighed in on this too, stated quite directly that India is now the most viable and cost-effective option for Apple manufacturing outside of China.
That's a strong statement. What are the advantages he pointed to?
He listed several. A good manufacturing ecosystem that's developing, lower costs compared to many places, local talent pools, supportive government policies, and crucially, expanding infrastructure.
And we're already seeing this happen on the ground, aren't we? Apple is expanding production in India.
Yeah, actively. Partnering with big names like Foxconn and also Tata Electronics, it's definitely ramping up.
Okay, but here's the potential spanner in the works. Maybe. Geopolitics. The source mentions former U.S. President Donald Trump.
Ah, yes. The threat of a 25% tariff on iPhones made in India, Trump insisting Apple should be producing in the U.S.
So how seriously is that threat being taken? Could Apple really shift production back to the U.S. on a large scale?
Well, the analysts quoted in the source seem pretty skeptical about that. They argue it's just not economically feasible for Apple.
Why not? Mainly costs.
Primarily, yes. Much higher labor costs in the U.S., plus the lack of that deeply integrated supply chain they have built up in Asia, and just overall reduced efficiency compared to their current setup.
Right. Apple's whole system is so deeply rooted in Asia, isn't it? China, and now increasingly India.
Exactly. Moving that complex web to the U.S. is presented as highly unlikely from a practical business perspective. It's not just about flipping a switch.
And Trump's proposed tariffs. They're seen as part of his wider trade policy goals, targeting China mainly.
That seems to be the context, is reciprocal trade policy. India currently faces lower tariffs than China, but the underlying point from the analysts is that Apple's big decisions will likely be driven by operational reality and profit margins, not just political pressure.
So India's strategy here is to position itself as that reliable alternative as companies look to diversify away from China.
Precisely. A strategic, cost-effective, and capable alternative. That's the pitch.
So despite potential bumps in the road like tariff threats, India still looks like Apple's best bet outside China, for now.
That's the conclusion drawn in the source material, yes. Its advantages seem strong. Of course, the future depends on how global trade policies actually evolve and how the economics continue to stack up. It's a balancing act.
Let's shift focus again, this time to a really interesting geographical and geopolitical point being made, involving India and Bangladesh. Assam's chief minister, Himanta Biswa Sarma, said something notable.
He did. He drew attention to what he called Bangladesh's own geographical vulnerabilities. Specifically, he pointed out two narrow corridors within Bangladesh, referring to them as chicken necks.
Chicken necks. Okay, that's a term usually applied to India's Siliguri corridor, right? That narrow strip connecting the northeast.
Exactly. And Sarma made this point in response to frequent concerns often raised about India's Siliguri corridor, which is, only about 22 to 35 kilometers wide in places. Very strategically sensitive.
So his point was,
yeah,
you have them too.
Which corridors in Bangladesh was he referring to?
He mentioned two specifically. The North Bangladesh corridor, which is about 80 kilometers long, linking specific districts. And then the Chittagong corridor, which is even narrower, only 28 kilometers wide, connecting South Tripura to the Bay of Bengal.
And the implication is that these are vulnerable points for Bangladesh.
Yes. He emphasized that any disruption in these corridors could potentially isolate key regions within Bangladesh itself, so pointing out a mutual vulnerability perhaps. And this came after comments from Bangladesh's chief advisor, Mohammed Yunus. What had Yunus said?
Yunus, during a visit to China, apparently, had described India's northeast as landlocked and positioned Bangladesh as its only guardian of the ocean, kind of emphasizing Bangladesh's strategic importance to the region.
Ah, I see. So Sarma's comments were a direct pushback against that narrative,
Wow.
using geography.
Seems exactly like that, a geographical counterpoint, reminding everyone that strategic vulnerabilities aren't exclusive to India in that region.
It certainly sparks a discussion about regional security, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the whole geopolitical dynamic there.
Absolutely. It underlines India's own strategic position, but also addresses or maybe counters some narratives about Bangladesh's regional influence.
Reflects maybe some ongoing diplomatic tensions, or at least careful positioning.
Could be. And it really highlights how interconnected things are in that region, the shared vulnerabilities, and why regional stability is so crucial for both countries as they manage their complex relationship.
Okay, let's switch back to cricket. But this time it's about selection controversies. Sarfaraz Khan's exclusion from the test squad. That's caused quite a stir.
Yes, it has. Sarfaraz Khan, the batsman, was left out of the squad announced for the upcoming Test series against England. This is despite having a really strong track record in domestic red ball cricket.
And the source mentions Chiteshwar Pujara offered some insight into why the selectors might have made that call.
Yeah, Pujara suggested the thinking might be that Sarfaraz's game isn't quite suited for English conditions. He also mentioned past concerns about fitness being a factor.
Sarfaraz did make his test debut earlier this year, didn't he? Against England in February.
He did, yes. But then he wasn't picked for the Border Gavaskar Trophy against Australia. The source notes he apparently lost about 10 kilograms before that England tour earlier this year, but he's still been dropped now for this next series in England.
What did Sunil Gavaskar have to say about it? His view is usually quite direct.
Pretty straightforward, yeah. Gavaskar's perspective, according to the source, is that players just have to perform consistently to keep their place. No guarantees.
And Pujara apparently acknowledged Sarfaraz as dominant in Asian conditions. But maybe selectors preferred someone else.
That was part of his comment, yes. Acknowledged his strength in Asia, but suggested selectors might have favored Karun Nair, another player who's done well domestically. Ultimately, it's the Ajit Agarkar-led selection committee making the call.
But the omission has definitely sparked debate, hasn't it? You have supporters pointing to his massive domestic run tally.
Absolutely. His first-class record is exceptional. They argue he deserves a proper, consistent run in the test side.
While the critics, or maybe the selectors' view, focuses on doubts about his technique adapting outside the subcontinent.
That seems to be the core issue, yes. Struggles on pitches outside Asia. So the decision looks like it reflects a selection strategy prioritizing adaptability to challenging foreign conditions, especially for Test cricket.
So the message for Sarfaraz seems pretty clear. Prove yourself overseas.
That appears to be the challenge ahead for him if he wants to cement a place in the Test team. And this upcoming 5-match Test series starts June 20th.
His absence will definitely continue to be a talking point, though, especially around opportunities for consistent domestic performers.
For sure, it always raises questions about that pathway and the selection criteria.
Okay, moving back to the economy, but focusing on financial markets now. Something about U.S. and Indian bond yields.
Yes, an interesting dynamic playing out there. It's about the narrowing interest rate spread between U.S. and Indian government bonds.
The gap is getting smaller. Why does that matter?
Well, it potentially impacts foreign debt inflows into India. The source says the difference in yield between India's benchmark 10-year bond and the equivalent U.S. bond is now at levels not seen in over 2 decades.
20 years. Wow. And that's mostly because the U.S. bond market has slumped.
Largely driven by that, yes. And Madan Sabnavis, the chief economist at Bank of Baroda, he described the U.S. economic picture right now as pretty unusual.
Unusual how?
He pointed to rising bond yields, but also a weakening dollar, slowing growth, and inflation potentially set to rise. All while the U.S. Federal Reserve is holding off on rate cuts, it creates a lot of market uncertainty.
And there's a political angle, too. Something about a U.S. tax bill.
Yes, the U.S. House Committee approving former President Trump's tax bill has apparently added another layer of concern for bond investors. More uncertainty about future U.S. fiscal policy.
So what's the potential impact on India? Are people worried about foreign investment drying up?
The concern is mostly focused on foreign debt inflows. Experts quoted believe India's equity market is pretty resilient thanks to strong domestic investment, but the debt side might see some shifts or caution from foreign investors due to these global factors.
So it's more about the bond market specifically.
Primarily, yes.
Yeah.
The broader effects of that potential U.S. tax bill and how the U.S. bond market behaves will definitely shape investment trends globally, and that includes flows into India.
So India's financial sector needs to navigate this uncertainty.
Exactly. Keep investor confidence up while these international currents shift. The Indian bond market, in particular, will likely see adjustments as global investors reassess their strategies based on what's happening with U.S. policy and markets.
Right. Okay. Finally, let's turn to a piece of internal political news. An arrest in Madhya Pradesh.
Yes, reports of an arrest involving a political leader named Manohar Lal Dakad from the Mansar area of MP.
And what led to the arrest? Something about a video?
Apparently, yes.
Yeah.
A CCTV video went viral, allegedly showing him in a compromising situation with a woman. The incident reportedly took place on the Delhi-Mumbai Expressway near a toll booth.
In a viral video like that? It must have caused quite a stir.
Huge discussion, apparently. The source mentions it had noticeable political undertones as well.
So the police got involved.
Yes, the local Bampura police station took suo motu cognizance, meaning they initiated action themselves based on the public information and registered a case.
Under which sections do we know?
The source mentions sections 296, 285, and 35 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita. These relate to the charges brought concerning the incident shown in the video and its public circulation.
And what's the focus of the investigation now?
They're trying to figure out who made the video viral, apparently, and whether anyone else was involved in the incident itself. They've asked anyone with footage to hand it over.
What about the woman in the video? Has she been detained?
Not yet, according to the source. The police are conducting a thorough investigation first before deciding on any legal action regarding her involvement.
And politically, have the parties distanced themselves?
Oh, yes. Quite clearly, an organization called the Dakad Mahasabha Yuva Sangh has denounced him, and the BJP, the Bharatiya Janata Party, has flatly denied any affiliation, stating he's not even a primary member.
So no formal connection to the BJP.
A BJP spokesperson clarified that while technically someone can join via just a missed call, suggesting a very loose potential link might exist on paper, Dakad holds no actual position or formal membership, basically keeping him at arm's length.
And this whole incident, since the video surfaced around May 21st, it's sparked wider debates.
Yes. The source says it's fueled discussions about privacy, about the accountability of public figures, and also the ethics surrounding social media and how quickly sensitive content can spread.
Right. And the investigation is ongoing.
Still ongoing, yes. Authorities are working to get the full picture.
Okay. And that wraps up our deep dive into today's top headlines from India Today for May 26th, 2025.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground, from that incredible IPL knock and India hitting that huge economic milestone,
Yeah, fourth largest economy.
to the careful diplomatic maneuvering with Canada, building partnerships with Guyana, this geographical back and forth with the Bangladesh cricket selection debates.
And finishing with that complex internal political incident involving privacy and accountability. Quite a range.
Our aim, as always, was to quickly give you that core information, those key details and what they imply, drawing it all straight from the source material, hopefully helping you get informed quickly on what's shaping things right now.
By pulling out those key points, discussing the connections, maybe providing a bit of context, we hope it gives you a clearer understanding of the diverse forces at play across India today.
Definitely. And as we finish up, maybe something to think about is just how interconnected all these stories really are, even when they seem separate.
How so?
Well, the strength of India's economy directly influences where a global giant like Apple decides to manufacture. Diplomatic ties are constantly shaped by history, but also by new opportunities and personalities.
Right. And even a local incident involving a viral video can tap into much larger national conversations about technology, privacy, and responsibility in this digital age we're all navigating.
Exactly. So engaging with this range of news from the global stage right down to local events really helps build a more complete, more nuanced picture of the world around us right now. Makes you think about the wider ripples.